Sometimes we feel quite insignificant in this big world of ours, so it's lovely to have someone with faith to actually just steer us down the right track.
760, you minutes, 5, 70, 775, 780.
In 1994, the Royal Agricultural Society and our working party hosted a national conference on farm stress and suicide. We thought we might get 50 people interested. We were turning people away when we got 250 delegates because we didn't have the space, and it caused a national sensation really. The farming press homed in on it, and it was clear that what we thought was a problem genuinely was. And what we then did was to establish a national charity, Rural Stress Information Network, which enabled us to build up a sort of portfolio of what the problems were. They included things like social isolation. They included issues like farmers were getting on in years and a lot of sons and daughters didn't want to farm, so there was a feeling of the family being separated from the land that they'd held for generations. There were lots of problems with things like the Common Agricultural Policy and late payment and cash flow, and of course the normal things like the weather and bugs and beasties all have an impact to play. The initiative to work with farmers gained huge momentum during the foot and mouth crisis. And in fact, locally, we launched a Herefordshire local support group the week before foot and mouth broke. We weren't permitted to visit farms because footpaths were closed, and biosecurity rules meant that there was a general prohibition against people visiting farms. So a lot of it was done over the telephone. There was a national scheme run by something called the Addington Fund, which enabled farmers to access small amounts of money. And so for 6 months, I was a telephone operator for the Addington Fund. I had farmers phoning me up with cash flow difficulties. In almost all cases, they burst into tears as they talked to me down the phone. There was a lot of public money poured into the initiative then, and that's waned, but the issues haven't gone away. We've had the BSE crisis, we've had cash flow situations, and we've had some appalling weather conditions, which cause, mini local catastrophes that have to be dealt with. For a time, I was the full-time agricultural chaplain for Hereford Diocese. Someone called Eleanor Reddington was the equivalent for the Methodist, so there were 2 of us. Now there are 5 of us and growing, and we're able to play to our strengths. We're also able to cover the ground geographically much better, but we could always do with more volunteers and helping and supporting people. I think we're still tasting the waters in terms of how we establish ourselves and getting the right sort of literature out to people.
And see John, see the bath, no problem.
One of the exciting differences with the chaplaincy that's growing at the moment in the Borderlands here is that everybody has participated or is participating in some way or another in the industry. And I think that gives a certain authenticity to those in the farming community that might be looking for an ear to listen or someone to chat some issues through. In my day-to-day life on the family farm, as well as a chaplain, I'm constantly meeting and engaging with people in the farming community. And I think building up those trusting relationships from the inside out was something that we really wanted to concentrate on as a chaplaincy.
The pastoral context with farmers can be very varied. Some of the cases we are dealing with go back years. I mean, there are people that are you always need to keep an eye on, and what you try and do there is make sure that there is a network of people around them that can help and support them. Our biggest problem is probably of farmers in their 80s and sometimes in their 90s who won't or can't retire, but you can't cope physically with the issues.
My dad's not old, he's 69. He can remember sitting on the Shire horse and scuffling while Grandad was scuffling. He's seen all that change in the industry, not just the red tape, but the challenges, the mechanisation.
And a typical scenario there might be that a vet or a trading standards officer would be called in because there's an animal health and welfare issue. They recognise, in fact, that behind that there's a human health and welfare issue, and they will, with the farmer's permission, call us in to support that side of the work.
Is there any mileage in organising a meeting with the banks earlier rather than later to try and get some sort of...
I had an email from NatWest Bank yesterday saying that they were going to offer a non-fee paying service to set up a loan.
Part of our job is to act as advocates. How do you go to a bank manager and try and renegotiate a loan if you don't have up-to-date books? And again, we're able to help either directly or because we know farm secretaries who will be sympathetic and who will come in and bring the books up to date.
I think the chaplaincy has a responsibility to meet people where they are. It's not always about expecting people to come to us. There are challenges in the geographical context we cover, how sparsely populated this area is. But I do really think the church needs to be prepared to move and travel and go to where the need is at that time. And we're really trying to be proactive in that way with Borderlands.
Well, I am agricultural chaplain, but no longer just with the diocese. Yep. We're part of Borderlands now, which is a joint initiative between the Anglicans and the Methodists, getting the message out.
The sustainability of full-time agricultural chaplains posts was pulled into question. We started to look at how we could grow and develop something that was more sustainable. And one of the things we really wanted to develop was actually that ecumenical flavour to the work we were doing. Different church denominations pooling whatever resources they had in money, in time, in people.
FCN's main role is to be a practical and pastoral support to people in the farming community. And what we were trying to do at the same time as Borderlands was beginning to develop was to develop an FCN group in Herefordshire. And it became obvious that there was a certain duplication of effort. The FCN group decided that the best thing to do would be to merge with Borderlands and cease to have a direct county group link with Herefordshire. If people pick up the national helpline from the press and come from Herefordshire, they're going to get the opportunity to be passported and signposted to the Borderlands chaplaincy to provide the support on the ground.
The vision of the Borderlands chaplaincy and where I see it growing is for people to come forward to help. To be a chaplain, you have to have farming connections to understand the farmer, and there should be training because farmers have to trust. There has to be so much trust and confidentiality within this group.
I remember one of the cases, somebody phoned me up and said, did I know anything about milk quotas? Well, as it happened, I dealt with milk quotas in the NFU, so I'm afraid I knew rather a lot then. It wasn't really about milk quotas. He just wanted to know that the person he was talking to had an inkling of the farming situation, and then eventually we got on to what the real situation was. I think there will always be a need for pastoral ministry amongst the farming community. The family farm is at the bottom of a whole raft of political and social and economic measures over which individual farmers have no control.
I do think there's an awful lot of people who are sustaining, and I'd only have to drive up the mountains to some of the bachelor hill farmers who are working incredibly hard for incredibly little, feeling incredibly unappreciated, and they're incredibly isolated. And it's only a matter of time before that starts to affect an individual.